Go. Okay, let's go. Hello, dear guests. I would like to welcome you to Fourth International Scientific Conference of Economics and Management Researchers, organized by UNEC and with sponsorship of Pasha Holding. Today's panel topic is role of universities in innovation ecosystem. Our guest today is our Ramil Maharramov, Senior Finance and Private Sector Consultant at World Bank and Adjunct Professor at AD University, MIT Sloan Fellow in Innovation. Rahim Bayramli, CEO of Sabah Lab ex McKinsey, Rashad Tagiyev, board member of Sabah Lab, Wharton MBA and McKinsey, and joining us from Spain, Joe Haslam, associate professor at IE and Scale Up program owner at IE. I would like to start a conversation from the first question of this panel is, what is meant by innovation and what are the different types of innovation in your opinion? Who would like to start? I think Joe.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I was just going to say that. Okay, well, I mean, let's see, even if like a heavy book fell on my head, I'd still be able to talk about innovation, right? It's basically what I spend all day talking about, and with good reason, because it's a very much a misunderstood concept. The most important thing you've got to try and do is separate innovation from invention. Because a lot of times people talk about innovation and they, especially when they're speaking in English, they hear the word new and then they think that it's something new and then therefore they think it's an invention. Whereas actually the most interesting part of innovation is the connecting the unconnected part. So the most interesting inventions are two things that already exist that are brought together. I mean, you can give a very professorial answer and say there's disruptive innovation, there's open innovation, there's frugal innovation. All of these books behind me all talk about those things. But it essentially goes back to this notion of connecting the unconnected. So you have two things that people hadn't previously seen how they could be brought together because, you know, very much we often live in silos. We just concentrate on the thing that's immediately obvious to us. And then the really exciting people and what entrepreneurs do is, why couldn't you use X to do Y? And that's when a lot of invention comes. So the work I've been doing with Sabah Labs is very much trying to kind of work out what already exists and then try and put it together with something that already exists. You know, you could talk about like, I don't know, chocolate or something like that has been around for like, you know, millennia. But it's like combining, say, chili peppers with chocolate that makes it interesting. Or you see that a lot with cuisine. I mean, here in Spain, we are very proud of our cuisine. I guess every country is proud of their cuisine, but we're especially proud of it. And you know, that's the new chefs. That's what they do. They combine things that weren't combined previously. So that's always my advice to people, which is to say, don't concentrate on going to laboratories. Don't concentrate on, you know, things that are not commonly used. To find two things that people already have and then bring those things together. And that for me is innovation.
Yeah. I will just make one here also addition. I think like you made a very good distinction between innovation and invention. I think also two other terms which people oftentimes mix up is innovation and creativity. People always talk about being innovative as being creative, which is right to some extent, because innovation does require a person to be creative as well, but it's creativity in a very specific domain. It's about being creative in solving a practical problem. So it's about basically using your creativity, but also combining that with real life problem and real execution. And that's also something like in Sabah Lab we focus on when we work with the teams. Oftentimes people get creative about solving problems which don't exist. But innovation requires it to actually be a problem to solve. And then using creativity to solving some real life problem and adding value to your future customers and your future users.
Adding on it, it's I think important to also know and understand the distinction between different types of innovation, right? As Rahim said, when you start solving something, first you need to define your problem very clearly, and you need to work on potential solutions. And the solutions, they can be the innovation for the solution can come either as like business model innovation, or it can be a technological innovation, and there are many other types of innovation. And what is important to understand is innovation is not, as Joe said, is not invention. You do not necessarily need to create something from scratch. You can connect two different things. Like if you look at Uber, what Uber is doing, that's a definition of business model innovation. You used to like go out to the streets and try to get a cab. What you're doing now, you have an app, basically connects you with the taxi drivers. There is no real invention there, or it's also not a technological innovation. It's a business model innovation. And it's, I think, important to distinguish and understand that, especially for countries like Azerbaijan, where the R&D or technological innovation has not been very prominent.
Ramil?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, good points. I think, every country passes through different phases of development, and innovation is actually one of the phases where countries reach at a certain level. I mean, first at the first level, countries try to adopt from all of the developed countries. This could be different innovations, even inventions, but then they try to adapt it to their own environment, ecosystem, and we have seen this in Korea and in other countries which could make leapfrog jumps to the list of developed countries. And after adaptation comes innovation phase, where the countries can do lots of innovation based on inventions which are even made in other countries or in other cultures. But invention is the most difficult part, and it requires much more definitely scientific and technological knowledge. And only few countries in the world have, we can say that, have a dominant position in research and development and invention part of these things, which are basically make major disruptions in the way we do business, or we can conduct our daily lives. So in innovation now, we are discussing mostly innovation, which is, I think, an appropriate phase for Azerbaijan, because we are heavily involved in adapting and in trying to innovate at this stage of our development.
Thank you a lot. So I would like to move to the next question is, we defined the innovation, but how does universities support innovation? I know IE Business School is very advanced in that sense, having a startup lab, venture lab, and etc. Joe, can you comment on the question?
Yeah, I mean, wow! Just on this question alone, I could fill the rest of the time. So you probably need to like raise your hand when I'm like, okay, Joe, we got the message. So, the first thing obviously is that universities have changed a lot, and by universities I also mean business schools. I mean, I like to remind my kids that, when I grew up in Ireland, we had one TV channel that was on for half the day. Access to information was really only when the professor had it in their head. That was really the only place the information was, and that has changed completely. So if anything, what you're trying to do now is manage the students, manage the flow of information, manage all the information that's out there, because they have to focus on something in order to make progress. So it's very easy to be distracted and lose focus. So I think the job of universities now is much more soft skills rather than hard skills. In other words, the hard skills would have been, walking them through material. I mean, I often say you can hear me telling you about a famous theory or something like that, or you can watch the author themselves on YouTube, talking about it or something. And that's my job, is to try and get you to watch that video, not to try and tell you that video yourself. My job also is to just try and make you understand that you're on a journey, that like the average age of a company founder is 45. I've created co-founded 6 companies, and I expect to create 6 more. So what you're really trying to do in the beginning, particularly, this is less true for, say, executive MBAs, but it's certainly true for perhaps MIM students and IE, is to get them into a position where they can develop self-confidence. It's one of the things I see a lot from the very first time I visited Baku to the last time I was there, that the confidence levels have increased a lot. And it just does by repetition, repeatedly reinforcing, and unblocking is another kind of, because in the beginning, people would say to me like, oh, that's not possible or whatever. And then I'd say, okay, well, go as far as you can. And then when you hit a block, like, I'll help you overcome that block. And I think that's an awful lot of what you do. So a lot of the action happens almost outside of the classroom or beside the classroom as opposed to previously. But that's really what you're trying to do, that you're trying to give people, inspire them, make them kind of understand that literally everything is possible, and then try and make them believe they have the confidence themselves to do things. I don't know who was the first person who said it. Sometimes they say that it was Confucius in China, but this idea that the core purpose of education is to give people confidence. And that's what universities should do. And that, by the way, is why I think universities remain an interesting part of the journey. Some people say that, oh, you don't need to go to university or something like that. I actually think that the journey is you still should go to university, get educated, be among other people who are also interested in the journey. Then perhaps go work for a company for a while where you learn things like interpersonal skills and that kind of stuff. And then there's still lots of time to set up a company afterwards.
Thank you.
Yes,
Joe.
yes, agree completely. I think you touched on a very important point here about the role of universities in developing the right human capital for the innovation ecosystem, and primarily that the role of the university now changed from just giving people knowledge to giving people more direction and like more confidence. If you look at some like other ways that universities support innovation, number one, of course, I think the most basic way that they support innovation is by actually doing research and development, which is how invention-based innovation happens. That's not the only type of invention, as we already talked about this, but that's still one of the most basically prevalent ways in which innovation happens. And I think universities are still the main source of where the research and development happens, and that feeds into the innovation ecosystem. The people take new knowledge from there, and they basically find the ways to commercialize it, and basically the innovation comes around. Of course, human capital is maybe even more important, developing the right people, and as you mentioned, developing the right skills and developing the right mindsets in people. And of course, I think it's also important what IE Business School is doing, what I think many of our local universities now think about as well, is you don't only give the people confidence that they can do this, but you also give them different tools as well. And one of the ways is by creating internal university incubator programs, like what you have at IE Business School, IE Venture Labs, where universities create internal incubators where people who get the knowledge in class, they get inspiration in class, they can come there, they can meet like-minded people, they can find their co-founders, they can start experimenting with some new ideas. University then helps them basically with additional resources, with additional mentorship, oftentimes by creating links with corporate sector as well. And in that basic ecosystem, in those basic chambers of the university incubators, people start putting in place what they learned in class. I think that's also one of the ways that universities can and oftentimes do support innovation as well.
Yeah, I think on Rahim's point, I just graduated from my MBA program from the US, right? And what I realized, the university had a very cool approach to innovation. They literally tried to look at it as like one holistic picture with different parts of what I like calling it a puzzle. It definitely started with the academics, giving the necessary soft skills to individuals, as Joe said, to increase their confidence. But they also had classes that helped people to have systematic approach to innovation, so that so most of the times I think there is a misconception, right, about innovation, about startups, that, there's one corporate, they have a very systematic approach, they need to live by the rules, and startups is where you have like chaotic approach, you try to do everything at once, and you just jump here and there. But the reality of the startups is actually somewhere in between. Of course, your life is not as certain as in corporate, but you also need to have systematic approach of how you you are approaching the problem. How do you define the problem? How do you go and look for a solution? How are you validating your product? What is your go-to-market strategy? And for that, you need to have some fundamental knowledge and approach it correctly. So that was kind of like the first part from university perspective, was academics, the soft skills and the hard skills. And the second part was infrastructure, meaning the program incubation acceleration programs. You can think of it literally like a physical space where people can get together, go through a program where they get like mentors, help from more experienced people to launch whatever idea they have, whatever innovation they want to create. And there are more informal parts to this puzzle as well, like access to financing. What we had in Wharton, we had Wharton Angels Club. This is literally a club that was created by Wharton alum. And whenever you have an idea, you want to raise your funding, you can go to that club, and then in the next like club meeting, either offline or physical, you could go and pitch your idea. And I think that adds tremendous value, especially from like alum perspective. Like imagine, think of a person who like graduated 20 years ago from your university. When you go and talk to that person and you're trying to raise seed funding, that person sees himself or herself in you. They're like, okay, yeah, this is smart kid. I used to be like this person 20 years ago, and I want to support this person. And I think there's both formal and informal links for the parts of the population that are important in driving the innovation forward in a given ecosystem.
Thanks. Ramil, we have a lot of ADA students at Sabah Lab as well joining, and we know that ADA University is supporting innovation within itself, and I would like to get your opinion as well.
I mean, universities stand at the center of the innovation ecosystem. I honestly don't believe in an innovation ecosystem that can exist outside of universities or far away from universities. And that is no secret that is the reason why all these major innovation clusters or innovation centers have evolved and spurred around large R&D and or innovative universities. For example, in the US, the Silicon Valley has evolved around Stanford and other universities in California. In Boston, it is around Harvard, MIT, and others. In Cambridge, it is around. There is Cambridge Innovation Cluster. It has spurred and developed around the Cambridge University, and this is nothing surprising. I mean, this is actually meets the nature of innovation and especially startups, and that's why I think in Azerbaijan we have to apply this model as well. And I applaud the creation of Sabah Lab, because Sabah Lab allows to tap the resources of all the universities, not just a single university. So going forward, currently we are speaking innovation, but I remember that this is a not new topic, right? I remember visiting the Cambridge Innovation Cluster back in 2007, and we were speaking very similar topics. Of course, concepts and new terms have evolved over years, but when I saw that innovation cluster, that was impressive. The great thing is that in Azerbaijan we are seeing some great universities emerging, like Ada University, like some innovative universities, UNEC, Baku Engineering University, Azerbaijan Technological University. So we have, I think those universities shall also play a larger role, and we as people, communities, and governments shall support them in these steps, because the role of in universities and innovation is indispensable, as I said, and it would be a great idea if we ever wish to create any technoparks or innovation clusters, they shall be established closer to universities and around university. Because sometimes I hear, they want to set up a innovation cluster, but it's located like 60, 70 universities from the closest university. So I'm not sure how those clusters can tap into human capital resource at the university, ideas resource in the universities, R&D in the universities, because that is too far. Going forward, we are lucky that we are getting some great universities, and they are evolving, they are developing. and I believe that they will be the leaders in taking innovation in Azerbaijan as well. And this is what the history and the experience in Europe and the US.
Thanks a lot. I would like to move to the next question. I know Joe covered it briefly, but I have a question: is all innovation, is invention, and academic research driven or no? And I would like to get Joe your opinion at first. And
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. I mean, the answer is yes, but I don't like to talk about it. I mean, it's like, I don't know, it's like getting married or something. Like the reasons you get married are not, the reality of marriage is very often who's going to empty the dishwasher or something like that. But that's not sort of what you talk about to sell the reasons why you should get married. Of course, it has to come from the background. And I was lucky enough to visit, say, the State Oil and Industry University in Baku, and you saw the importance of research there in terms of innovation. But a lot of what we're talking about in Saba Lab, like if you talk too much about research, it can put people off. Essentially, it all has to revolve around the customer and what problem are you solving. And then unless you want to talk about deep tech, which is, everyone struggles with deep tech, right? So, even, in MIT and actually there's very little deep tech research in Silicon Valley. They really struggle with it. They've put a lot of money into things like energy and haven't really got anywhere. Where they're good at is like making people click on ads and that kind of stuff, But, so that's the thing, which is to say the answer to your question is correct, that of course, academic research is a huge part of the innovation discussion, but I much prefer to talk about delighting customers. Whenever I talk about people, I'd say like, don't go to a library, don't go to stop people on the street and say like, what if I gave you this app, would you use it to do whatever you want, right? That's a much more interesting kind of question, and understanding the customer. And of course, I guess you could say that there's academic research from psychology that helps you to do that. I'm not dismissing that, but I often think that when you talk too much, again, you're putting barriers and impediments in front of people, and you're putting them off, setting up companies. Essentially, the customer is the center of everything, and creating something that the customer wants. And generally, those things already exist, as we discussed earlier. You have to bring them together, with the exception of deep tech, if you're going to do something that's much more complicated. But I think, that is... that's a problem everybody has, and I think we should sort of focus on the problem with deep tech is, for like if you're building rockets or something like that, there might only be one customer for that product. Okay, so how are you going to deal with that? So, but all of that comes from a university. So that's my answer is that yes, you're correct. But when we talk about innovation and we talk about entrepreneurship, we need to talk a lot more about the customer and creating something that solves the problem for the customer, rather than that there was this amazing piece of research created in a lab and that alone, will lead to success. The reality is that there are fantastic inventions but that nobody managed to find a way in which to solve a problem in people's lives. And that's what entrepreneurship does. It creates a product or a service that allows you to solve a problem in people's life. And in many cases, they don't really care about the technology. It just allows them to do what they want to do. And that's where the focus should be.
Rahim, can you...
to build on this? Sorry, Khan.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that we have 21 startup at Sabah Lab right now, and I think that more than a half of those startups are currently studying a bachelor or master degree or already graduated. So, does this innovation, is invention academic research driven or no within even Sabah Lab walls or no?
Yeah, I think this question, as we already mentioned, like no matter whether innovation is innovation and research driven or not, it still usually is very much intertwined with universities, as we already mentioned by multiple speakers on this panel, that basically the story of innovation and story of universities are very much intertwined and they go together. That's important to note and basically understand. I have the question about like whether it's invention driven, both in general and in Sabah Lab. I believe that, as Joe said, the question is yes to some extent, but I would say that it's both yes and no. It depends on the perspective. So if you look at the very macro view, for example, you can always argue that the source of any innovation was at some point some invention. Even when we talk about companies like Uber or Netflix, which are primarily doing business model innovation, they will still be they still were able to take off on the back of internet revolution, basically, which was one of the biggest inventions of the 20th century. So one big invention led to thousands of different innovative companies. So in that sense, at the root of every single company, probably there is some kind of invention at some point in history. And that's true for the company in Sabah Lab as well. Most of them are internet-driven companies. Most of them are building on the research and inventions which happened over the past like 10, 20, 50 years, depending on the project, depending on the company. On the other hand, if we speak more practically, not like researchers, not like academicians, but like if you're just a young guy or a girl who wants to start their own company, but you're not in deep research, you're not a researcher, you don't work in a university research center, for example. Does it mean that you cannot innovate, that you cannot open a creative company or innovative company? The answer is, of course, not. What you will be doing will probably be based on some kind of invention. But you can always, as Joe mentioned earlier, you can always connect the dots. This person did this invention here, that company had that invention here. I will be connecting them like that. So it's about getting creative in solving practical problems. So in that regard, the actual company that you will actually be able to basically find, as Joe mentioned again, it will primarily be driven by the customer pain points. What are the customers' problems that they have today? Which existing oftentimes technologies you will have to utilize to be able to solve that problem. So in that regard, in a more micro view, on a level of an individual founder, does the innovation have to be driven by invention? Not really. You don't need to think about invention or research when opening your companies. And what we see today in Sabah Labs, there are 21 companies. Most of them take existing technologies, existing solutions, and they adapt it to the needs of the customers in particular sector. Oftentimes, they even adapted to geography of Azerbaijan, of the region, to be able to start here as well. So again, macroeconomically speaking, the answer is yes. If you talk on a level of individuals, the answer is oftentimes not necessarily. And don't stress about it too much. If you have a good idea and you know how to implement it, you don't need to think about the research part of it. You need to think about the customer. You need to be customer focused. You should be obsessed with the end buyer, end user, rather than the research which has happened already.
Exactly, Rahim. Just to add a slightly point there, probably there are a lot of people watching who either want to create their own startups or they are in the early stages of creating their own startups. So the idea is not doing and creating something from scratch. And the idea is also not falling in love with the product that you're building. There might be teams out there, and we see it very often, right? There are teams who work on a product, app, or website, or whatever, and they sometimes lose the track of why they are doing it. They just want to create the best engineering product out there, the best app with the best user interface or whatever, but they often fail solving a problem that a set of customers answer. And that's why in the very early stages for all the startups or innovators, let's call it this way, it's absolutely important to define a problem that they want to solve. And we always say in Sabah Lab as well, don't fall in love with your product, fall in love with the problem that you're trying to solve, because the products can change. You can, we've also seen startups who have defined a problem, who started building a product, and down the line, they realized that the solution that they have is actually not that great, and they pivoted their solution or the product. But the focus has always been the problem and should be the problem.
Yeah. So from my perspective, I think I joined the answers that it is partially yes and partially no. For complex technological issues and problems, probably yes. Innovation requires some type of academic research, R&D type of activity, which are very expensive. And as we said, currently the most advanced countries have dominant strategic position on those type of R&D, and they are trying to protect their advantage in those fields. But lots of problems in the world can be solved with innovation, and they are not supposed to come, not necessarily require invention or complex R&D type of activity. And unfortunately, in many places, in countries and in organizations, what I have observed is that the management have not adequately used the huge potential of ideas exist in the organizations. The simple idea management, which is part of innovation management, can really bring huge economic value add to companies and to countries. But unfortunately, many countries, and setting up such an idea management system wouldn't cost them much, honestly speaking. I have seen, and there are so many white label applications which help organizations to manage idea management, right, as part of their innovation management. But they are very this part of innovation is hugely underutilized, especially in our country. I hope most of companies, including universities, can utilize this very cost-effective, affordable innovation methodology, which can bring millions of dollars, even either in additional value or through cost savings, which can bring also lots of value, resulting value creation. And I look forward to that. And I would say that many problems in the world require more like approach to the problem, as some of our speakers said, falling in love into solution of the problem. And in several practical cases, we have seen that in some cases, innovation just requires just bringing all of the invented technologies together. Even at the core of Apple technology, we know that stands the chip technology, or flash memory technology, which is invented in Germany. But it was Steve Jobs which brought it into a product which is loved and demanded by customers, including iPad and then iPhone, and commercialize it. And commercialization is also very important. We will probably come to that point. Most of R&D and inventions, unfortunately, cannot be commercialized. But countries do that because either for strategic reasons, for futuristic plans, and other reasons. But those successful countries, especially innovative countries, are those which can commercialize most of the inventions and R&D. But innovations don't necessarily require to be based on inventions and academic research. And that is probably our lack of countries like Azerbaijan, which would allow us to become innovative even without having, at this moment or in a short period of time, without having a need to develop R&D capacity, which is very expensive and requires lots of resources. And that is tragic that, unfortunately, in Azerbaijan, R&D spending as part of GDP is still very low, and I'm sure it will increase. And the government strategy dictates that it will grow very fast. But we cannot wait that long for our R&D capacity to improve so that we start our innovation attempts or innovation ambitions. We can start it now, and we have started already without waiting for R&D capacity to catch up.
Thanks a lot. On the point that you mentioned about how white labeling options and etc. nurturing the entrepreneurial mindset within the universities, I have a next question that is based on that. Is that what Azerbaijan universities can do to maximize their impact in innovation? We can start from you, and you can build up on the point that you already made about white labeling, or maybe there are other strategies that you think that will benefit the local universities in that sense. Ramil?
You
yeah, he's changing it because it was like it was unfair that I was getting to take all the information away, and leave you then with nothing to say. So I mean, that was sort of unfair. I like it's very polite to always ask the guest to go first, but it's very unfair also on the other speakers. So maybe you should go ahead this time.
Yeah, I think that Ramil also covered the good part about white labeling. So maybe we can start from that and then build up based on that.
Very good question, Orhan. And one of the, as we said, the cost-effective options would be the tapping into huge idea potential of student body in the campuses, and I'm sure most of students have certain approach to solving certain problems that they are experiencing or they see or observe from the societies. And here, simple idea management frameworks could really make big impact. The other options, I'm sure our speakers will speak more about those options, is of course having innovation centers or labs within the university campus is definitely very helpful and useful. Most of innovative universities have such capacity. I'm sure IG, MIT, they have, for example, in MIT, they have Martin Trust Center, which also comes with Fab Lab, where which enables students to really play with their ideas in a sandbox environment, to create a demo version of that, or a minimum viable product version of their ideas. So this type of capabilities are definitely useful. And in most of universities in Azerbaijan, I have seen those type of attempts, which is good progress. I hope also that those innovation centers will be improved further, because just having innovation centers or infrastructure is not enough, because you need to have good set of mentors, coaches. I think one of the advantages of Sabah Lab is definitely that point specifically, that they have been able to establish this mentorship coach network, tapping into international experience as well. Most of universities can do that, and I think that would really be very impactful. The other approach is definitely access to finance issue. I know that Sabah Lab covers most of universities, but within universities as well, if universities can establish their own funds, and most of universities in the US and Europe, they have their own funds, like they call it investment funds or endowment funds, some part of which can be used for financing the ideas of students, at least partially, at least just to enable them to prepare their minimum viable product, so that they can gain and improve their confidence, as Joe mentioned, right? Because university, one of the major role of universities is definitely to build confidence and fundamental skills in students. And the best way of achieving that is allowing students to apply these skills or ideas in a controlled environment like innovation labs, with some partial financing to make it more real. Because one of the roles of universities is to prepare them to real life, to help them to transition from education to work, right, to labor markets, or to market-driven corporations. So in that case, of course, these innovation labs are very important. Mentorship network is very, very important. And these are, I think, fundamental approaches. Of course, competitions, hackathons, and Sabah Lab is really doing most of these things on behalf of many universities, which I think is a good model for Azerbaijan, because not every university at this time can afford to have their own labs, their own Fab Lab, their own Technopark, their own mentorship and coach network. But of course, entrepreneurship culture is also important, Orhan. Unfortunately, I personally have been involved in several competitions and several startup camps. What I see is that we in Azerbaijan, we still have a weak entrepreneurship and love for risks, right? Most of students, they want with the influence of their families to go to after guaranteed jobs, corporate jobs, or public service jobs, but which I think is definitely connected to lack of entrepreneurship education in our universities or in our schools. So if you can also have strong entrepreneurship education, building confidence of students that they can become entrepreneur and work for themselves. They don't need necessarily to work for others. They can be job creators. They can be innovators and problem solvers. The life is not about just working for some corporations or some other investors. You can work for yourself, and entrepreneurship can give that confidence to them.
Great. I mean, you touched very good points there. And I know that as Sabah Lab, we have some plans about the support the processes even one step further with universities. So, Rahim, can you please comment on the plans that we have about the cooperation with universities?
Yeah, exactly. I think like I will try to even combine these two questions. There was a question about what universities can do to support innovation, and also what Sabah Lab can do together with universities, maybe, or how Sabah Lab can maybe support universities in some cases in actually delivering on those basically ambitions. Again, in my opinion, like I think most of the points were mentioned throughout this conversation about what universities can be doing. We can have a multiple buckets here, like how will you categorize these potential avenues on what universities can do. The first I would say is, of course, what we already discussed. It's about research and invention. Uh, by focusing more on research and development going forward, universities can, of course, stimulate innovation environment as well. But as already mentioned, we cannot be waiting for that. I'm also sure that within the next years, we will see the surge in both R&D budgets and R&D activity happening in the universities. Here, we just need to be waiting for basically those things to happen on the one side, but also not delaying our plans regarding innovation and creation of new innovative startups. In this alley, I think the role of Sabah Lab will be quite limited, as Sabah Lab is not a research institution. On a second bucket, which I think is about developing human capital within universities. As we discussed, it's both about hard skills, actually teaching people what they need to know, like technical skills, to be good technical co-founders in basically these new startups, business skills, to be able to find the right problems, to analyze them, creating the right business models, commercializing ideas. So this is the hard skill part of the human capital equation. And as Joe already mentioned about inspiring these people, giving them the soft skills, showing them that they can do it. As Ramil mentioned as well, changing their culture, showing them that there is one more way. You of course can graduate and go and work for one of the biggest companies in the country, local or international. That's an option, and those companies need to be filled with high quality talent and human capital. But there's also second option as well. You can also start your own company. You can also start building your own vision as well, and that also needs to be taught and showed to our youth as well. So here, I think universities have a very important, very vital role to play. And at Sabah Lab, how we see our roles here, when it comes to soft skills, we already work with university students. A very big part of the founders in Sabah Lab, they are from the universities as well, and they will continue to recruit from universities. But we also plan to start working even closer with universities from next year. We would like to launch our new project called Sabah Academy, where we want to bring the best entrepreneurship education from the best universities in the world when it comes to innovation to our universities. Basically, we want the best curriculums from all over the world and the best professors to be teaching our students in our local universities. When it comes to topics like business model creation, problem solution, basically product market fit, digital marketing, financial modeling, and so on. We need to bring those knowledges, those skills to people. And in doing so, we actually achieve here two things. Number one, we make sure that people are more prepared to get started on the innovation journey. But also by teaching them these concepts, we're also inspiring them to choose this as their potential career path as well. So the human capital, I think, is here a second big bucket. And the last bucket is, of course, I think, the startup support infrastructure. And that involves all these things like creating internal incubators where people can come, work together, meet their co-founders, solve some of the problems that they have in their minds. It's a place where, or a department within universities, which can also be responsible for bringing in the corporates to the equation, to be able to source the pain points from the corporate world. It's about, as already was mentioned as well, creating different angel clubs, giving access to these people to investors as well, so they can raise funds as well. So there should be basically different centers in universities which bring together all those necessary tools and instruments and give it in a very easy to use manner to the students. And here as well, we're planning to launch a project called Sabah Incubation, because so far the reality of Sabah Lab is that I believe that we were able to deliver real value, real positive value to the people that accepted to our program. But the reality is that we only have 21 startups in our cohorts. Maybe 1 year we can accelerate 40, maybe 50 startups. But I believe that's not enough. We should be able to we should start touching more and more startups every year. And to do that, we will be looking forward to partner with various universities to be launching local university incubators. So the idea should be that thousands of people should be getting access to the right information, to the right vision regarding startup ecosystem. Hundreds at least of companies should start forming within the walls of those universities, and maybe tens of them will be coming and joining Sabah Lab. Some of them will be joining some other accelerator incubator programs. Some of them will be going straight to the market without the support from any incubator. Some might even join some international programs as well. But the idea, we need to increase this pipeline from the moment we take people to educate them to the moment that we release them and they basically are already mature enough to be able to raise new rounds of funding on their own. But for that, the support and the role of the universities will be instrumental, because without universities giving access to all these students, all this talent, this will not be possible.
I have just one quick question to Rahim Bey. Is that, I mean, I know that you have signed a cooperation with the Technovate Angels Club. Are you also open to establish such cooperation with other angel networks that might be interested in cooperating with Sabah Lab?
For sure. Because as Sabah Lab, our goal here, the reason why we established Technovate Sabah Angel Club was to give, to maximize the opportunities for our startups to raise funding. And I believe that, the reality that oftentimes people say that there are so many venture clubs, there are so many investors all over the world. But the reality is that for somebody to fund a company in Azerbaijan, they will oftentimes want to see some traction and some results already, which requires some pre-seed or seed funding. So I think the strategy that Azerbaijan should have here is that we should be able, as a country, internally, oftentimes, fund our startups at the beginning of their journey, so they can hit the ground, they can basically finish their MVPs, get initial traction, and then they can go to international VCs, international angels. That's why we need to maximize the number of local VC companies that we're opening, local angel networks. So we already established one angel network with Technovate. We have 25 angels there. Our idea is to increase this number to around 100 by the end of the year. But of course, if there are any other groups which want to partner with us to launch even more angel clubs, we will be more than welcome to basically work with them. And even I think when we had our first angel club meeting, one of the first things we told to our basically coming members was that we created this club, but we hope that in the coming years, some of you will create additional clubs of your own. Somebody who was the first member of Technovate Sabah Angel Club will then find 15 other people, friends of him, for example, friends of his, who will join, one more club, and so on. The more clubs we have like this, the better for the startup and the better for the ecosystem.
Perfect. Thank you.
Joe, I think that
I was just being polite. So you want me to come in here? I wrote down just while I was waiting. I wrote down 4 things I wanted to say. The first thing is just engagement with outside of Azerbaijan. I mean, the first thing is to say, don't think that other universities aren't interested in collaborating, right? You know, the rule of entrepreneurship is always, you know, unless you ask, you don't know, right? So, you know, there's almost everyone is interested in collaborating and going to new places. I mean, people who are in universities are very curious people. You know, they're always interested in finding ways. Also with online, I mean, I'm teaching now in 2 more institutions that I just wouldn't have had time to teach in if I had to go there and all of that. But because of online, we can do a lot more. So that's the first thing, engagement outside of Azerbaijan. And for Orhan, I'll say engagement outside of Baku, right? So, you know, he always reminds me that there's more to Azerbaijan than just Baku, right? So that's the first thing. The second thing is this idea of doing a business plan, and in our university we force everyone to do a business plan. I mean, we are all business people, we're all interested and connected in business, but you know, some people think that the business thing is a very strange world to them, and you have to sort of like give them a task in order to engage them. So, is it possible that absolutely everyone should do a business plan, even if it's just an exercise? Certainly in we have subjects and things like international relations, for instance, and you might think, how can you ask an international relations student to do a business plan? But of course you can, right? Things like, there are lots of areas and problems to be solved. So we require everyone to do a business plan. The third thing I wrote down is this notion of excellence. And understanding exactly what excellence is, and that universities more and more, are less about credentials and exams and more about people understanding what is this thing excellence. What is something that's really good, and very often we have things around us that are excellent and we don't really regard them, but the same characteristics of creating an excellent coffee shop or whatever it is, and something excellence are applicable in other areas. So universities need to celebrate excellence more, and also recognize what's around them, whether it's history or these kinds of things. So I think universities very often they miss things that are on their doorstep, as well as engaging with the diaspora and other countries. You also need to celebrate your own history and things that are on your doorstep, and connect the unconnected, not just think, oh, if I'm teaching chemistry, we should only have famous chemists. These kind of things are very much characteristics of both the Boston and Silicon Valley sort of ecosystems. So engage with diaspora, but also celebrate things that are local examples of excellence, and bring those to people and making them kind of, do an exam. But just we all have to move away from just thinking of universities as just a place where you get your credential. And so that means engaging with industry, means engaging with diaspora, it means engaging with local examples of excellence. And it's actually really exciting. I don't want to be, as a professor, giving the same presentation twice a year, every year. I want to be reacting to what's going on. So, when somebody in Madrid does something new and exciting, I want to bring that person to my classroom. And it's actually a great privilege that I have, which is to say that most people will answer my call. And I imagine that's the case in the case of Sabah Labs. Almost everyone in Azerbaijan will answer, if they get a call from Sabah Labs, can be convinced to give us an hour. So, those are kind of things. So it's really exciting to be like that. It wasn't like that in the past, when it was very much turn up to class, hear a professor, write down the answer, get a piece of paper. So, that's all of those things. It's a very exciting time to be working in universities. And, that's true whether it's us here in Madrid or you guys over in Azerbaijan.
Thank you. I have one more question. We got to hear the plans of Sabah Lab to support universities. Are there any plans by World Bank or any additions by Sabah Lab to support universities for driving innovation forward? Ramil, I guess we can start from you, because we already hear some sneak peek to
Sure.
Sabah Lab plans. Yeah.
Sure. The World Bank Group and other DFIs, development finance institutions, are very interested in supporting innovation, innovative capacity development in Azerbaijan, because innovative human capital is one of the strategic objectives of Azerbaijan. As we know, we have 5 strategic priorities for until 2030, and all these international development institutions are always ready to support the government in achieving their strategic objectives. So World Bank is interested. There is huge potential and capacity existing in World Bank that can be shared and benefited for advancing innovation agenda of Azerbaijan. I think I'm part of the finance competition and innovation team at the World Bank, and we are interested in starting a program in Azerbaijan. Of course, we work with the governments and government agencies, but if the program is started, definitely universities will be a big part of that involvement, engagement, and one of the pillars of the project or program, whatever it will be, definitely will be related to universities, because without that, you cannot ensure sustainable innovation in the country, and including the risk capital development in terms of both infrastructure and human capital. Rahim Bey mentioned angel investors, venture capital funds, or even developing the legal framework for making sure that venture capital business model is more applicable and profitable for Azerbaijan to support innovative and risky projects.
Rahim, can you add on top of that?
Yeah, and when it comes to Sabah Lab, just about Sabah Lab's basically vision of the future of basic innovation in the country. Our vision is basically to start becoming an innovation platform which will be built primarily on the shoulders of the universities. Because we understand if you cut universities from the picture, then what Sabah Lab will be doing will be basically meaningless. Without universities, as we mentioned already multiple times in this conversation, there will be no innovation. But Sabah Lab for us is an innovation platform in a way that we would like to partner with various other players of the ecosystem. Number one, universities. Then you have corporates. You have investors. You have government bodies. And our vision here, you have internationals here as well. And organizations like EBRD, like World Bank, and so on. And the idea here is that every single party here, every single basic entity should see Sabah Lab as a platform where I can come, I can basically plug myself in, I can add some value to the ecosystem, and I can extract some value. Because every player, every stakeholder needs to have their own, basically, they have their own goals and agendas, and they should see how what Sabah Lab is doing is fitting into that. So it's something which should be a win-win, both for the ecosystem, for Sabah Lab, and also for the entity which is coming in. And how currently we're structuring this pipeline, because for us, it's all about creating this basically pipeline. You can segment it in the three distinct phases. You start with, of course, human capital, because we always say it in Sabah Lab. When we even admit teams, the number one thing that we look at isn't actually the idea itself or technology. Number one thing is the team. So basically, human capital. So number one, we have human capital initiatives. As I already mentioned, in Sabah Lab also, we're bringing the best of the best professors in this industry together with IE Business School. We're already working on human capital here, and I want to expand this to launch our Sabah Academy within the leading universities of Azerbaijan to be able to maximize the number of people that we can touch, that we can teach, and that we can inspire. The second pillar here is, of course, a startup support infrastructure. So once these people of the needed caliber enter this ecosystem, they need to be given some tools on how to build this product, on how to build these businesses, on how to talk to customers, and so on. And for that, again, that's something we do in Sabah Lab itself. And what we want to do again with universities when it comes to Sabah incubation, to create local basically offices in universities where we can support universities to be able to create that environment for their students. And the third one, also the one that we mentioned, is about building the venture ecosystem. And here again, we have multiple things here. Number one, we already created one angel club, and we'll be looking forward to grow this angel club, create or help create more angel clubs, and so on. We want Azerbaijani investors, corporate leaders to see innovation ecosystem, local startups as a potential venue where they can invest. Second thing, we are looking forward to creating our own venture fund in the coming 1 year, and we're looking forward to partner with anybody else in Azerbaijan who is intending to create a venture capital firm here. Well, that's one more point. And lastly, as Joe mentioned as well, it's not only about Azerbaijan. It's not like a closed country. We're already working very closely with multiple regional VCs, global VCs, with angel investors from all over the world. The idea is to build these relationships with external investors, with external partners and entities to bring them into our ecosystem as well. So that's the pipeline that we are planning to create. And anybody who sees that they want to add value and they want to cooperate with us in any part of this pipeline, we're always happy to meet. We're always happy to discuss. And we will be asking anyone who's listening to us today as well, anybody who wants to work with us, anybody who wants to apply to Sabah Lab, please don't hesitate to reach out and speak with us.
We have to meet Rahim Bey at one point. I will give you a call to meet up and explore how we can cooperate.
Sure.
I think a partnership is working out here. Yeah, and my last remark is just I want to ask Joe's opinion. So far, like we have been working with Sabah Lab and IE together for past 6 months closely, and Joe has been already like 3-4 times to Baku. I want to get his perspective on the progress that we have had so far with the university students, especially in our pipeline, how they grow over that period of time, and general opinion about Azerbaijan startup ecosystem progress.
Sure. Well, I'm looking at Rahim's face because no matter what progress we make, Rahim will always want more, right? So that's the sort of like he's a very demanding, which I guess is we're happy to be held to high standards. But every time we meet, he always asks me like, "How are we doing?" And I keep saying, "Listen, this is a 10-year project, we're well ahead in the first 6 months." So progress isn't made exponentially rather than linearly. And what you need to do is get the first, say, 18 months right, and then it sort of takes a life on by itself. So if you try and, I don't want to start using metaphors from biology, but if you try and force growth, it's hard to sustain that. You want to build something on the basis. And I've always said, and Paris has said this as well, which is to say that, we get the beginning right. And then we scale from something that we're comfortable with. Scaling is I guess my research area. If I was to be critical, I think you guys are too hard on yourselves. You often make excuses. You often say like, we're in a mature ecosystem and we're just starting. And then like I meet someone who literally I could headhunt, bring back to Madrid with me in a suitcase, and like 5 people would offer him a job. So I think you guys are a bit too critical of yourselves at times. But you've always been very open to all the suggestions we make, and always been very welcoming, both on a kind of a business side and also looking after us and making sure that we were well looked after, which is why I have no difficulty in coming back and repeatedly coming back, and I'm looking forward to my visit. So I think the first cohort was obviously everything had to happen very quickly, and we learned lessons, and then the second cohort is noticeably better, and it's when we get the word of mouth effect. That's when we really know that things are moving. And I think we're kind of, there is some evidence of that in the second cohort, but that's always the thing with a successful business as well. When you have customers actually knocking on your door, then that's the sense that things are really moving. But I think that you need to be less hard on yourselves. I absolutely think that there is a lot of talent in the ecosystem, perhaps talent that doesn't reveal itself. And then, once the Sabah Lab starts to really develop a momentum, then I think that talent will start to be proactive in like knocking on our door rather than us having to kind of convince them. And I think that's the real sign that when that starts to happen, then we'll really be making progress. But it's exponential. It's slowly in the beginning, and then it starts to compound. And the compounding effect is when it gets powerful, because then you're scaling on something of substance. You haven't sort of forced it or anything like that. And then, of course, I guess the final thing is when we get outside investment. That will be the real kind of when literally outside investors, people who have no relationship other than they deploy their capital wherever it finds the best reward. When that happens, will be a day that we will all celebrate, because that then is a sign that we have created something. We have created something here. So we're very much that's always been. That was the thing, the metric we measured ourselves by at IE University, and it's the metric that we're also measuring the work that we're doing with you guys in Sabah Lab.
Thanks a lot. I want to thank all the participants of this panel discussion. Ramil, it was a pleasure to meet you. Joe, I was happy to see you once more. We have always productive conversations, and I enjoy these conversations. Rahim, Rashad, thanks a lot for joining in. I want to thank you guys and finish the panel discussion here if you have nothing to add.
Thank
I
you
would
very
just
much.
like to thank UNIC University as well for this opportunity. It was a great pleasure to be here, to have this wonderful discussion. And I hope we'll have many more going forward.
Same, I
Okay.
join Rahim, yeah, for thanking UNEC and you, Orhan, for moderating. Very nice moderation. And all the guests. Joe, pleasure meeting you. Rahim, pleasure
Yes.
meeting you. And Rashad,
Okay.
pleasure
Thank
meeting
you, Ramil, and thank you, Rashad, and thank you, Rahim, and thank you, Orhan, of course, wonderful host. We need to discuss who Arsenal are signing in their preseason at some time. We've signed more players in the last week than we have in the previous 6 months, so that's a very exciting development. So I look forward to seeing you guys in a couple of weeks, and I look forward to a really exciting international day that we have planned. Okay.
Thank you, and hope to see you in Investment Day in the near future. And
Thank
Ramil,
you.
I hope to see you at Investment Day as well in July 18th that we have in Baku.
I'll definitely make it. Thanks for invitation, Orhan. Thanks invitation for Rahim Bey. Thank you. Thank you. Bye, Joe.
Thank you. Thank
Okay.
you.
Muchísimas gracias. Un saludo desde Madrid.
Bye.